So, hi, Ryan. Welcome to this interview. I'm really happy to have you here. I'm Marianne Bernasconi, and I record interviews of people who I found are having active actions or another perspective on life and the way we can interact with the living world. So, what I aim at is helping cities and organizations to adopt a way to include life in what they're doing so that we can go for regeneration instead of destruction. So I'm really happy to have you here because what you're doing is working for the wildlife, and you are working with the idea to build corridors for wildlife to be able to move freely, and you are completely dedicated to this project in South Africa. So I would like to know more about what you're doing, how it's going on, and how everything started. So my first question is, how did all this journey start, and what happened in your life?
So I'm actually very freshly and newly in Eden to Addo. I only started this year as CEO. But my journey in terms of reconnection and uh, bridging the gap between separation between people and nature started very many years ago. I'll never forget when I was finished university, I traveled up my own home continent, Africa, and had incredible experiences all along the way. But I stayed with the Masai Mara in their village and living the community life. Um, and that was in Kenya. And something really stuck in my mind. There was a family with a young boy who would go out with the men to tend the cattle and go over the hills and through the fields tending the cattle. And his sister would have to go to school. And it was, of course, a colonial school from colonial influence in Kenya. And just feeling and witnessing that difference between the two children, the boy was so excited to go out there into nature, and he was learning counting, he was learning about the insects, he was learning so much, but it was a direct connection between him and his natural environment. And his sister was dragging her heels and didn't want to go to school, because there was this disconnect between the life she was living and what she was sitting in the classroom and doing. And that really inspired me to follow the path that I did for many years in environmental education, to reconnect children with nature, because we are nature. It's not something separate, reconnect who we are as a strand in the web of life, not as something separate. So this work in Eden to Addo was actually initiated by my mother. So there's a family connection there as well. And it was her vision way back in 2006 to start opening up corridors. And she was inspired by an elephant that lives close to us. She's about 30 kilometers away, and she's the last free roaming elephant in South Africa because her habitat has been fragmented by human activity in agriculture and, of course, hunting. There were hundreds of elephants, thousands of elephants in that forest originally. But she became a symbol for what happens to a species when they are cut off from the rest of their kin and when there is no longer freedom of movement. And so the idea and inspiration for Eden to Addo was to open up these corridors of connection again between ecologically important areas, between protected areas, and to allow this natural flow of life and for migration and for animals not just as big as elephants to move, but insects for pollination and for seed dispersal by birds. And we have an example here of the sunbird, beautiful iridescent green and red bird. And they don't fly over large stands of alien vegetation. So if it's not natural vegetation, so that is also a disruption in the corridors of nature. And so, yeah, the idea was to just start in our local area here. It's an extremely beautiful area with forest and fynbos. And at the first public meeting, the then manager of the Addo Elephant National Park, which is almost 400 kilometers away, said, please don't stop with the corridors just in the garden route. Stretch them all the way to Addo, where the other elephants are. So the vision grew, and now there are 4 different corridors we are focusing on, linking Garden Route National Park to Baviaanskloof, which is a World Heritage Site, and all the way to Addo Elephant Park. So now it's a large-scale landscape linkages that we are focusing on. It's a big vision, it's long-term, but we have already protected, through biodiversity stewardship, 50,000 hectares, and our goal is 100,000.
Wow. So when did it actually start, this whole journey?
So yeah, it was in 2006.
Okay, so it's been a long time
that
already.
the organization, yes, yeah. So it started in 2006. Though it's a non-profit organization, and one of the first things that the organization did was initiate this pilgrimage to wilderness called the Eden to Addo Great Corridor Hike. It was awareness raising and also allowing people to experience the walking through the corridors over mountain ranges and really experiencing immense and wide open spaces and wilderness. So yeah, so that was one of the, and that hike has been going once a year for very many years. We aren't doing it currently, but that is one of the ways that people can actually engage with the corridors.
So just before, you were talking about this little boy in Kenya and about environmental education. Do you still have some kind of project to connect children with this project?
Well, we do have a theatre company, Lunchbox Theatre, that we work closely with, and they do environmental and social theatre at schools for school children. So we actually have fundraised specifically for the development of a play that focuses on connection to nature and the importance of corridors. So this theatre company then tours local schools to do the show, but it's obviously funding dependent. So as we get funding in for that educational theatre show, so we do it. At the moment, we don't have funding. If there's anyone who wants to fund a show at a local school in South Africa, then yeah, get in touch.
Okay, good to know. And so you've been talking about a lot of successes with the corridors, and the project is developing itself. I was wondering, what were the main hindrances that you've got during this year, you or your mother?
Yes, well, one of the challenges is, of course, funding. We 100% funding based, so we can only do as much as the funding that we have. And, you know, we now have this 30 by 30 target, which is the Kunming-Montreal Agreement, which was signed in December last year with the Global Biodiversity Framework. And the 30 by 30 target is one of the targets of this framework, and that is to protect 30% of all terrestrial land and marine landscapes by the year 2030. So we are hoping that will mean that there will be more funding coming from the global north towards the global south for projects such as these, which are working with biodiversity protection and restoring the integrity of ecosystems. So we're hoping that's going to emerge. So that is one of the challenges. We can only do as much as the funding we have available, but it's amazing what has been achieved on a shoestring so far. As I said, already 50,000 hectares are protected. And that means, when I say protected, they are formally protected, so recognized internationally and nationally. It's been government gazetted, it's on a title deed, so it's, yeah, they are formally protected. Another challenge is, of course, that, you know, working in conservation, or working, I guess, in any field, it comes really down to education and people's personalities. So we work with the landowners and the farmers who are interested and willing. And, you know, if you come up against brick walls again and again, then you realize that that's not the path that the corridor can go. We have to work with landowners who see the long-term vision, who want to leave a legacy for their children and the next generations. So yeah, the challenge is for people to really understand the importance that without functioning ecosystems, we don't have clean air, we don't have fresh water, we don't have healthy soil to grow our food. So, you know, it's a big picture. And people, you know, when you say something like biodiversity, a lot of people, you know, don't really understand what that means and how important it is. But biodiversity is the richness of life, and without the richness of life, we're going to pull out. It's like a house of cards, and if you start pulling out the pieces, you know, this insect, that species, that river is polluted, and slowly the whole house of cards is going to fall down. So it's about communicating and educating quite complex understandings of nature and ecosystems and biodiversity. I would say that is also a challenge. And then, of course, the physical challenges on the landscape are the fences. So the fences block the flow of life. You know, we have situations where, you know, bucks such as kudu try and jump over these fences and their feet get caught and they die a terrible death, or tortoises get stuck along the bottom of the fences, especially if it's an electric fence, and they have a reflex to retreat into their shell when they are in a shocking situation like that, literally. So they don't move away. They literally think, they get a fright and they retreat into their shell, but their shell is still touching the electric tripwire, and then they're electrocuted. So fences in that way really stop the flow of life. So fences are a challenge, and education around fences, so that we obviously need fences, and people are farming, and agriculture is important because people need food and we need to eat, but it's about how we do it. We can fence off the human activity, fence off the agriculture, fence off your own homestead, and rather open up the other spaces that are not for agriculture to let the flow of life continue again.
And why do they need to fence? Maybe it's a weird question, but why do they need to fence the land they farm, basically? What is the threat? What are the threats for them? Because we live in such a different country, you know. I know in France, for example, they fence where cows are, but not necessarily where they farm land. So yeah.
Yes, well, South Africa has a very interesting history in terms of also colonialism, and you know, the land, the people who are living on the land are not the Aboriginal, the indigenous people of the land. So there was this, obviously, this colonization, and this, as would have happened, you know, in America, as the settlers moved west. So it was, fences are also about claiming your land. This is mine, and staking your territory. So we have a long history with fences in that sense. And then, of course, that disenfranchised people, the San or Khoikhoi people who are originally living on the land in the interior of our country. So yeah, there's a history there to fences. And then there are threats. People do need to fence because there are wild jackal who will come and eat your sheep. There are leopards who are still roaming. So people, for that reason, also do need to fence off their land. But we like to look at what could be other creative ways. You know, if you look at the shepherds of old, they stayed with the animals or brought them in at night. And so, you know, what are other creative ways we could look at that could provide employment and could enable people to take down the very many fences that we have? And some of them are really impenetrable. The other issue is that we also have game farms that now put up extremely high fences and then isolate pockets of land that are impenetrable for the animals that are living there, because these fences are so high.
Is it to hunt them down then, the animals that stay inside?
Yes, the game farms generally are hunting farms where people can come and overseas visitors can come and hunt. Yeah, it depends on which farm it is and what they have, but whether it's antelope, kudu, impala, or some of the game farms allow you to shoot even endangered species such as giraffe and rhino, etc.
I see. And so earlier you said that some farmers, they have this long-term vision. And what are the the arguments or the advantages that they see for them if they let the flow of life go through the place they own?
Yes, well, I mean, it is about seeing that you want to leave a legacy of life. How can we create conditions conducive to life? Because our ecosystems are unraveling and we're losing biodiversity at unprecedented rates. We're losing species 1,000 times faster than is natural. So it's for those landowners who see that we are in a crisis and what can they do to play a positive role. There are also other reasons. For example, one of the areas we work in is in the Karoo, called the Springbok vlakte, which would mean the springbok, which is an antelope, the Springbok Plains. And there you would have had many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago, you would have had springbok in their thousands migrating. And now you will see a few here and there. So the farmers there have been farming for hundreds of years, and they have just recently experienced an extreme drought, over a decade, a drought, which was only broken this year. But it's tough. It's really tough territory, to survive and to do well as a farmer there. So, and also the land has been degraded over years and years of overgrazing. So they also see that perhaps there's a time to shift. This land needs regeneration. It needs a new era to be brought in. It's almost like in some of the places, the farming era is coming to a close and there is a new opportunity for rewilding, regeneration, restoration to emerge in that landscape.
Are there some initiatives where the farmers have to manage to have their farm, productive farm, and at the same time managing wildlife or restoring wildlife?
Yes, absolutely. We've got a very good example here in the Robbo Coastal Corridor, which is a small corridor which runs along these exquisite cliffs, joining a very cut off small nature reserve, which is a peninsula, Robbo Nature Reserve, to the much larger Garden Route National Park. And within this corridor, there is a dairy farmer called Ken Brogy. And there they are actively farming and on a portion of the land. And the other portion of the land, which is on the coastline, right on the cliffs, and there's still fynbos, they have declared a protected environment. So you can have the best of both worlds. If you are declaring your property as a protected environment, you can still actively farm and manage the other parts of the land in an environmentally sound way so that nature can recover.
So it's a good news, and it gives faith that some people have found solutions. And at the same time, what I understand is that some farmer, they tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's more cultural, like the challenge they see that could prevent them from opening the fences. Isn't it more cultural, old beliefs, than I don't know, are there other challenges they face or reasons why they don't want to open and let the corridors go through their properties?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, is that it is cultural, especially with farmers who have been, on their family has been on that land for generations, and they have always done things the way they have done things. And so change is difficult. And to see the possibilities of changing your land use practices, and perhaps instead of looking at farming as your major income stream, looking at ecotourism as your major income stream. But yes, it is a difficult thing to face when you've been on that land in a specific relationship literally for hundreds of years. So it is a challenge, and it is a cultural challenge. You're quite right.
And what do you do, or maybe other NGOs do to help them go and see past this way of seeing life?
Yeah, so we have a fantastic corridor coordinator, Dick Carr. He's an incredibly experienced conservation biologist, but he himself has also been a farmer. And he goes out into the landscape and engages with farmers one-on-one and has conversations. And I think that's what it's about. It's about having conversations. And he is passionate about all these tiny little succulent plants that are extremely rare, and some of them are threatened, and even beyond threatened, critically endangered. In fact, he even found one that they thought was extinct, and he found it in the wild. So what happens is his passion for the land, his passion for the landscape and for the plants is infectious. And now you have these farmers who now are also, they phone him and say, I found a succulent on my land, and they are so excited about it. So it's about building relationship, as is everything, in life. We're talking about reconnecting the relationships between species that have been disconnected. We're talking about reconnecting the relationships between people, and reconnecting the relationships between people and the land in a positive way that is positive for both people and for the land, and for the more than human species who we share this beautiful area with.
Beautifully said. And yeah, another optimistic point, that some people, they really shift in their mind, and they can make the the jump, the leap from a belief to another, and accept change, accept to share. Also, you said at the beginning that without wildlife, then the earth is dying, right? Ecosystems are not balanced, so we do need wildlife. And so many good stuff happening. I know that one of your main challenge is funding, because that's how you work, that's how you fuel the initiative. What are other challenges that you face in the future to have even more acres open to wildlife?
Well, what can also happen is that different organizations are all working in their silos, doing what they're doing, even though they're all conservation organizations. Or so but what is exciting is that what is really happening now is that the organizations are starting to speak to each other and see, I'm working on this part of the map, which part of the map are you working on? And so to not be in competition with each other, even when it comes to funding, but to say, this is the big plan, and we are, we're focusing on this area, and you're focusing on this area, and how can we collaborate, and how can we support each other, and see how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together for the same goal. We're all working towards the same goal, which is to regenerate life, and so and make conditions conducive to life possible by increasing habitat. Because environmental work in the past has often been focused on a species, save the whales, save the rhino, but you can't save a species if you don't protect or restore their habitat. A species can't exist without their habitat. So there has been a shift in thinking more about habitat, which is, habitat just means home for plants, home for animals, home for us to live. So yeah, while working in competition might have been a challenge, I'm really seeing a shift in how, and I think especially as we see the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis unraveling before our eyes, people are realizing we really need to work together on this. So that challenge for me has been turned into a positive.
So you see that people are taking actions and really are more and more aware of these changes and that we need to act now. Do you see that, really?
Well, well, maybe in the world that I and the people that I'm speaking to, and in the world that, you know,
Yeah.
it can become a bit of an echo chamber where, you know, the people you are working with and speaking to and interacting with, it feels like that way. But sometimes when you step out and realize how much education needs to actually happen when it comes to realizing what we all can do on a small scale in our own homes and our own gardens, whether you're living in a, you know, a flat in the middle of a city to if you are living on a large scale farm, there are things we can all do. And I I I'm not sure that the awareness is where it should be in terms of how serious the crisis is. You know, the insects are facing an apocalypse. We're losing insects so fast, and they are the building blocks of so many of our ecosystems. If we don't have our insects, you know, who's going to pollinate our food, and what are the birds going to eat? And you know, so I do think there is so much room for education and awareness when it comes to how serious it is, but also to not get to a state of hopelessness, but rather, you know, what can we do, and what is reasonable and realistic to do in terms of, yeah, creating habitat, even as I say, in your own garden. And that's what I'm talking about large scale corridors, but corridors don't have to only be between large national parks and reserves. You can create a corridor in your own neighborhood. You know, if you all agree to plant indigenous or native plants, you are creating a corridor for the birds of that region and the insects of that region. So corridors are not just large scale projects. They are, you know, any areas or spaces where connection can start happening. I mean, you see how they are now planting on top of bus stops in Europe, you know, so that bees can have a place to refuel as they're flying. So think of it like that. How can we join the dots so that even in urban areas, in suburban areas, these spaces can become habitat and can become corridors again?
Thank you so much for this piece of advice. I think we do need it, and sometimes we might be too ambitious, and that's a good thing to remind us that we can act on smaller scales. Another of my final question is, okay, so if you want to, what can we do? How can we help? Where can we find more information about your initiative? And yeah, how can we contribute to it?
Thanks very much for that question, Marianne. Yeah, so if you would like to find out more, you can, of course, visit our website. I'm not sure if you'll put them in the notes, but it's www.edentoaddo.co.za. You'll get more information there. And we have just started a campaign where people can become corridor custodians. So for the price of, oh, well, I don't know, with the exchange rate between South Africa and the euro, it's probably less than a cup of coffee. But if you contribute less than a cup of coffee a month to our cause, you can become a corridor custodian and leave a legacy. So we want to leave a legacy of thriving life from Eden to Addo. So that is one way you could become involved. And other ways would be, as I said, to create corridors in your home spaces. By one of the big things for me is to stop using poisons of all kinds, so herbicides and pesticides, because, as I say, the insects are really being impacted, and they are the building blocks of life. And so, well, there are many more, of course, the smaller ones, the bacteria and the fungi and all sorts. But yeah, you know, if you can prevent using poisons in your home space and allow the meadows and the native plants to return, you know, that no-mow concept. And also, instead of planting plants that are exotic, you know, plant what is native to your area, what is indigenous to your area, and that can really make a big difference.
Thank you so much for this perspective, this point of view that you have from your space, and reminding us also how we can mostly simply act, basically. Do you have a final word or something else you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think, we talk about these corridors, as I said, on the landscape, but it's also about these corridors in our minds that we need to open. We need to join the dots and make the connections so that we do not feel this separateness from nature. I love the book, and I know you do too, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is in so many of her chapters, there are these reminders about how we are in relationship, and we forget that as humans. And so to rekindle the relationships between your family members, between your work colleagues, between the more than human world. So interactions you have in the day, whether it's an insect or a frog or a bird that crosses your path, to feel that we are in relationship, we are connected in this very intricate and beautiful web of life. But not only that, that the earth gives us her gifts every day through the food we eat and the air we breathe and the water we drink. And to be in relationship means that what you are gifted, you also need to reciprocate. And so to think how in your everyday life there are ways in which you can give back in whichever way it might be, but that you feel that this relationship is alive. You reciprocate in some way. And some of the suggestions I have given are ways in which you can reciprocate. And it comes down to also, of course, our buying choices, the food we eat, to think about, whatever daily decisions and choices we make have ripple effects through the world and in other countries of the world, through the supply chain, who was growing the food and what conditions they were working in, and of course, how nature was impacted. So yeah, make conscious choices that are in positive reciprocal relationship with the people and the more than human world and nature around you.
Mm-hmm. And it really resonates with me because that's what I will keep from our conversation. One of the aspects, many others, but about reciprocity. One of the person I interviewed a few months ago already has written a book about shamanism and animism, and he's been in contact with various indigenous people from all around the world, and it all goes down to reciprocity. And also Robin Wall Kimmerer, she says it in every chapter, reciprocity. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for this, for reminding us about this. It seems simple, but is it something we really do? Something to reciprocate every day with in all our interaction with humans or more than human world, as you just said. So thank you very much, Rhian. I wish you a lot of successes in the future. I wish that this corridor is going to enable many, many wildlife to be able to have this natural flow again, and that we can really make a difference in our generation. So thank you very much again.
Thank you for having me. It's been a very enjoyable conversation. And I just want to close with one thing, is that, the original people of South Africa, the San people, who are also called the Bushmen, when they would hunt, they would first ask permission of the eland or whatever animal it was that they were going to hunt. And they were living in true relationship with this land. And it's those stories that need to be told to reawaken in us how we all once lived in positive relationship. So yeah, we need those stories.
Mhm. Thank you very much again.